Morning, church. Happy Monday. It is good to have you on this last Monday of June 2020. I don't know about you, but we're ending another month. The month seems to be racing by. The year seems to be racing by. It's almost mid-year. Yesterday, I issued a challenge in the church, and our announcing clerk read it for us. I want you to spend Tuesday an hour and a half quiet time with God. I already got my spot picked out. I know where I'm going to be and do my meditation, but I want you to have a quiet time with God and do some reflections and then ask Him to direct you as we begin the second half of the year 2020 for us. When we look today, I've got a word for you. Do you realize it's the 15th week of being shut down? 15 weeks. And yet in those 15 weeks, the church has been thriving. Souls have been getting saved. People have been joining our church. I'm so excited about what God is doing in this new day and new time for the church. But I want you to this morning to join me in a word from the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 10. And we'll read a few verses. And I think in chapter 10 we'll read, let's see, we'll start in verse 32. Chapter 10, verse 32. And we'll read through verse 35. On Mondays, I generally use my NLT Bible, so if you have an NLT, you can track with me. If not, whatever version you have is good. Last week, we read from the book of Jeremiah, an Old Testament book. This week, we're going to be in a New Testament book, the book of Hebrews, chapter 10, and beginning at verse 32. I got my bearings now. Think back on those early days when you first learned about Christ. Remember how you remained faithful, even though it meant terrible suffering. Sometimes you were exposed to public ridicule and then were beaten. Sometimes you helped others who were suffering the same things. You suffered along with those who were thrown into jail. And when all you owned was taken from you, you accepted it with joy. You knew that there were better things waiting for you that will last forever. So don't throw away this confident trust in the Lord. Remember the great reward that it brings you to. So I want to give you this thought this morning and this challenge. Hold on to your faith. Hold on to your faith. When I look at my life and I look at life that we know now, that's the new norm, there's simply times in life that you and I can simply say this, that we will find ourselves fighting for our faith. I don't know about you, but every day I get up, I have to fight for my faith because every day is a new challenge. Every day, sometimes the enemy comes at me, and I know I'm not the only one, but I find myself oftentimes fighting for my faith. So in fighting for our faith in tough times, we have to come to this mindset. You come to a crossroad, and you have to decide, if I'm going to continue to trust God, this unknown God who I haven't touched, I have no tangible access to, I have spiritual access to, am I going to continue to trust God? Or at this crossroad, am I going to take the journey and the path that I own it now? I'll do my own thing. And the author this morning in the book of Hebrews issues a challenge to Christians to hold on to their faith. The Apostle Paul, many theologians have accredited him for being the author of the Hebrews, and it doesn't really matter. It's a book of the Bible, but the Bible is written to the Hebrews, and it is written to encourage Christians in tough times. And it is written to encourage Christians in tough times because there are specific things that are going on in their lives. Look at what the author of Hebrews says. He says, I know you need to be encouraged because there were times that you were beaten, times that you were publicly ridiculed, times when what things you owned were illegally taken from you, and you chose to accept it and smile and trust God anyway. So he encourages them, and he says to them at the end of verse 35, look at what he says. He says, hold on to your faith in whatever you do. And I like that because today we live in a time that we need to really hold on to our faith. We're in an in-between time. And I shared that in yesterday's message, and I hope that people got it because we're in an in-between time. We can't go back to where things were. That's not the normal anymore. We don't know what holds for us in the future because we're not privy to that. God has that in the palm of his hand, and we are in this lull time wondering what God will do. Well, when God is not speaking, the one thing that you and I need to do is hold on to our faith. And that is the challenge that the Apostle Paul, through the book of Hebrews, gives to all Christians this morning, in his day and in his time. But in our time, I'm giving it to you. When we can't see God move, we have to trust him. He's moving. Christians walk by faith and not by sight. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard of all the good things that God has for us. 2 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 9. Paul encourages the Corinthian church, look, you haven't even seen the glory of what God is going to do in our lives. And if we would hold on to our faith and endure during these tough times, I do believe that it will get sweeter as the days go by. Here's what I want to leave with you today. 1, in tough times, always review God's faithfulness. You remember what Jeremiah penned in the book of Lamentations? He says, great is God's faithfulness. And he said that because he was overlooking the ravaged, burned down city of Jerusalem. And tears, I'm sure, came to his eyes, where once the temple stood, it was burned to the ground. Houses and the whole city of Jerusalem was devastated by the Babylonians. And Jeremiah, as he stood lamenting in his book of Lamentations, he stood and he said, the Lord allows the dewdrops to fall fresh every morning. And when I look at God, I have seen another day. And he says, great is the faithfulness of God. So I'm challenging you, in tough times, review God's faithfulness in your life. I always have to come to a point when I'm thinking about God and thinking about things, and I say, Lord, I have to reflect now on how good you've been good to me. How good you have been to me in my life. So second thing I want to give you is that don't blind yourself to the tough times. I'm not saying that we should live with blinders on and not realize the situations that we're in. But even in the tough times, I want us to renew our minds on the promises of God. God has promised to be with us to the end. God has promised that he would never leave us or never forsake us. God has promised us that he would be with us if our minds are stayed on him. Remember this word in Philippians, let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. What was the mind of Christ? To always please the Father. What was the mind of Christ? To finish the mission that he was on. What should be the mind of men and women who are in Christ and dealing with tough times? That God will get us through. He will. He'll get us through. And lastly, I want us to do this. It's so easy to complain now. I see people complaining every day. They're complaining about wearing masks. They're complaining about having to wear gloves. They're complaining about having to stay 6 feet apart. They're complaining about this and that. Stop complaining and start looking at what God has done for you. Start thanking God for the blessings in your life. I thank God for this morning, the breath of life. I thank God that he started me with the freshness of this week, that at this point in the week, I haven't made mistakes yet. And I pray that God will keep me, that I can get through the week without any mistakes. I thank God that he has blessed us still as a church family to come together to worship and to fellowship every week on Sundays, again on Mondays during Monday meditations, on Tuesdays when we have our Bible studies. There's so much to thank God for. So stop the complaints. And in tough times, hold on to your faith. Don't quit. Don't give in. Don't give up. God has promised that he will see us through. Remember this, endurance wins the race. God bless you.